Bakhmut is of great importance both because it is close to the Russian border and because it is located at a point that will shield the Russian invaders from spreading to the east of Ukraine. Therefore, winning or losing Bakhmut will change the course of the war. A recent development in Bakhmut has backed the Russian army into a corner. The Ukrainian army blew up the bridges through which the invaders were transporting troops and equipment. Bakhmut is a city where fighting has been ongoing since the beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian war. In June, the Russian army lost most of its strength in Bakhmut in the face of the Ukrainian army's successful defense and counterattacks. For this reason, Wagner Group soldiers were deployed to Bakhmut in June. However, the Wagner Group soldiers are also failed to achieve success in Bakhmut. Putin's other plan for Bakhmut was to promise freedom to Russians in prisons so that they could join the invasion of Ukraine. Prisoners who accepted the condition of fighting for 6 months for freedom were deployed to Bakhmut. But Putin's plan also failed because the Ukrainian army was getting stronger day by day and the Russian army was insufficient against this power. The Ukrainian army, which continues to corner the Russian invaders with its successful attacks, recently carried out a very critical operation in Bakhmut. So much so that this operation was so important that it would affect the course of the war, because the supply lines and bridges of the Russian invaders in Bakhmut were blown up one by one. This means that the Russian invaders are desperate in Bakhmut. Let's take a closer look at the developments in Bakhmut. The Ukrainian army continues to destroy Putin's plan to expand into Ukrainian territory through Bakhmut. The Ukrainian army repulsed the Russian invaders' attacks in Bakhmut and pushed the invaders away from the west of the city with counterattacks. The Ukrainian army, which targeted the invaders with air and ground operations, gained control in the west of Bakhmut. The United Kingdom made a statement about the developments in Bakhmut. In a statement on its social media account, the UK Ministry of Defense said, "In the city center, the Bakhmutka River now defines the front line. Ukrainian forces hold the west of the city and have destroyed key bridges over the river, which runs north to south along a 200 meters, 800 meters wide strip of open space. With Ukrainian troops firing from fortified buildings to the west, this area has become a killing zone and is likely to make it extremely difficult for Wagner's forces to try to continue their frontal assault to the west." Russian troops who were able to spread over the Bakhmutka River to different parts of the city were surprised when the bridges over the river collapsed. Russian invaders became an open target in Bakhmut, and Bakhmut became a killing zone for them. Because with the destruction of the bridges, Russian soldiers were cornered east of Bakhmut. The Ukrainian army may launch its next offensive east of Bakhmut. The developments in Bakhmut were also on the agenda of Ukrainian authorities. Recently, the Ukrainian High Command organized a meeting. The subject of this meeting was the developments in Bakhmut. Colonel General Alexander Syrskyi, commander of the Ukrainian Ground Forces, and General Valery Zaluzny, commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, made statements after the meeting. Ukrainian officials said that they maintain their resolve in Bakhmut and that the offensive in the region will continue until the Russian occupiers are completely cleared. The events in Bakhmut were also on the agenda of the war commentators and analysts. Many analysts cannot make sense of what happened in Bakhmut. For them, there is no point in taking this ruined, almost completely destroyed city. Ukrainian officials, on the other hand, believe that if Bakhmut is lost, Russian invaders will advance eastward. Bakhmut is considered a stronghold of eastern Ukraine. The destruction of the bridges and supply lines in Bakhmut dealt a heavy blow to the Russian army. With the destruction of the bridges, Russian leader Vladimir Putin's plans were also destroyed. Because Putin was planning to capture Bakhmut completely in order to reach eastern Ukraine. To realize this plan, Putin invested heavily in Bakhmut. The main ones were the deployment of Wagner Group soldiers and Russian prisoners in Bakhmut. The Russian army, which lost about 200,000 soldiers to the Ukrainian army, lost the vast majority of its troops in Bakhmut. So much so that US officials announced that 30,000 soldiers belonging to the Wagner Group alone were killed and wounded. As it is known, most of these soldiers were also serving in Bakhmut. Wagner Group is running out in the Bakhmut. In recent weeks, the boss of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, shared the bodies of his soldiers in Bakhmut. Prigozhin posted this photo because he was unable to get weapons and ammunition from the Russian army. Prigozhin said that his soldiers died because they were unarmed and blamed the Russian army. What happened behind this accusation and before the photo was shared revealed the situation. Wagner Group boss Yevgeny Prigozhin and Russian Chief of Staff Valery Gerasimov were at odds. The Chief of General Staff before Gerasimov, Sergei Surovikin, was a friend of Prigozhin. Prigozhin could easily obtain the weapons and equipment he wanted from Surovikin. Prigozhin thus grew stronger and stronger, so much so that he announced the capture of Soledar without the Russian army knowing. This move of Prigozhin prepared his end. First, Putin replaced the Chief of the General Staff and then prevented Prigozhin from contacting Russian authorities. Prigozhin made a statement about this issue last week. Prigozhin noted that all opportunities in the Kremlin were blocked for him, and the Russian army did not help the soldiers fighting for Russia. He stated that he would continue to be at the front even if they did not help. Prigozhin's statements and actions were meant to take part in the post-Putin Russian administration, because it is now clear that Russian leader Vladimir Putin will lose against Ukraine. So much so that even Russians believe in this fact. Since Putin will soon have to leave the country's administration, businessmen, politicians and oligarchs who have to say in Russia are preparing for the post-Putin Russian administration. A claim was made recently. According to the allegation, Prigozhin and Kadyrov started to work secretly together for post-Putin Russia. Kadyrov, one of the few people very close to Putin, was passing the information he received from Putin to Prigozhin, but no evidence has been presented to substantiate this claim. Since the day he launched the invasion of Ukraine, Putin has suffered major blows in the war and continues to take blows from those he thought were his friends. The Russian leader is being cornered day by day. What are your thoughts? Will the blowing up of the supply lines and bridges in Bakhmut affect the course of the war? Will the Wagner Group troops withdraw from the war? What do you think about post-Putin Russia? We are curious about your opinions. Follow us for more updates.